the ways to think about crisis is to notice that it comes with a mental model. So if I ask you, well, when you think of crisis, what happens in your imagination? Something happens in your imagination. For different people, it's different. Like if you're homeless and someone's like, hey, there's a crisis coming, the banks are foreclosing. The same thing does not happen in your imagination. So that word is very interesting and also suspect, because we are in a period where we like to entertain ourselves with over-dramatized reality. And we have the meta crisis and the poly crisis and the X risk. So we have to be careful with that. And so one of the things to really notice is that you have this mental model. So once we get past that, you might notice that you're uncomfortable with unpredictability. And then you might notice that, zoom out and realize that for most people, for 99.9% of the people, for 99.9% of the time, their lives have been unpredictable. And so you've been living in, as a modern Westerner, you've been living in a world that is been in a bubble and made things seem predictable, primarily since only after the two wars. I mean, like 60 million or 80 million people died in the wars in the European theater. If that wasn't a crisis, I don't know what it is. So first get a handle on what exactly the crisis you're imagining and you're dealing with is, in the sense of your own life and in the history of human civilization. So once you do that, you can start looking at it and saying, well, maybe it's not a crisis, but maybe it's an apocalyptic shift. Maybe it is a time between worlds. Maybe a lot of things are happening at the same time. And you notice that it's like superposition. You're in two states at the same time. You want it either to be the way it was, like the way it was when I grew up, or you want it to be over and done with. But what you really don't want to be is in the middle of it. You don't want to be it's okay being a caterpillar, it's okay being a butterfly. What is really hard for us is when it's you're neither a caterpillar nor you're a butterfly. You're some kind of wicked mush inside. And I think that's really what our crisis is, which is, it's not a crisis to be a pupa, but it's something that we use the term crisis for. So we're kind of like gooey mush in a lot of our institutions right now. And so then you notice that you have a resistance to letting go, and you're impatient for it to finally be over. Like literally, it's if you say, would you rather be unsure of the world, or would you rather live for 30 years in an authoritarian regime? Most people would be like, I just would rather live in an authoritarian regime. And this is actually something good about the stasis in the system, because it will dole out the crises in a different way. So you don't even have to be worried about that. Like you start to see that there's an intelligence in this system. Now you have a narrative that says, yeah, we're living through this. Like, how many people get to live through this? And be aware of how uncanny it is to live in the mushy part of the in-between. And then you see this is opportunity for the historical record. This is opportunity for humans to put something in the historical record that's never been in there before. Because we're aware of this uncanny time. And it represents opportunity to mine that situation, because it has affordances and constraints that didn't exist. And so, just these kind of shifts in curiosity and attitude. First you have to get rid of the little story that runs in your head and the drama and the fears. That's going to be in the background, but that's not the important thing, and that's not the exciting piece. The exciting piece is to be as interested in the constraints and affordances that are rising today as the PC was years ago. I mean, the PC has a lot of affordances and a lot of constraints. And that's just a technology, but we're looking at a global, new complex potential state. See, this is the problem again, because everyone's looking at it as the markets are adapting, and you could say, well, no, what's happening is it's recomposing a kind of potential state that hasn't, it probably existed before time between worlds, but it hasn't existed in a way that's transparently conscious to a lot of people who are talking about it, right? So that beautiful phrase, time between worlds, gives us that ability to really step up to once in a lifetime opportunity. You know, it's like the comet comes around once every 500 years. So like, if you can, you get outside and you go look at it. But you have to let go of this notion of what is lost, you know? Like, remember the ancients and the philosophers, but like, appreciate them for leaving themselves behind. This is that kind of a time. So what a gift that could be to people of the future to understand this, what it's like to go through a time like this, and you know, and have them make all kinds of sense out of it. They could look back at it when it's all said and done and put this story together much better than us living through it. But if we don't give them that information, then it won't survive as a richly textured, you know, history. Like, you can read the history of the Nazis in World War II, or you could read the Diary of Anne Frank. And so there's a lot of diaries people could be writing, and not in this like, oh, it's crisis, but like, what is the moment that is unique, that people would love to know about? I think that's an important message, and I think a lot of young artists are semi-consciously doing that. The thing is, if you look at it and your mind starts to go, well, how am I going to adapt? You know, this whole notion of resilience I wrote in the paper. It's like, people say resilient, but what they really mean is just building, you know, bigger ocean barriers and stuff, which is just more fragile. And the term resilience from the panarchy model by Hollins and Gunderson was meant to say, in the back loop, when things are in between, it's impossible to understand. It's by definition, the back loop, you can't understand it. So you have to use different action logics in it. And it's these kinds of action logics. You decouple, you rethink, you reimagine, you put things behind, you know, you leap ahead. For example, we can already see education as we know it is dead. And it's going to take a long time for it to evolve. But many people are, like, I tell people who are working on educational systems, I'm like, why are you trying to give kids access to LLMs so that they can know as much as the AI? They'll never know as much as the AI. Just seed that to the machines. You got to think, like, what are machines not good for? Well, they're not good at running counterfactuals, because people run counterfactuals because they imagine the world they want to live in. And a machine doesn't imagine a world. All it can do is go and see what other people have imagined, you know? So to me, that's why the leap happens, because enough people see all of that's not worthwhile working on. So you get people working on ideas that are very future-oriented. Companies like Google and Apple have more money than whole entire countries because they don't have any ideas to put their money into, not the kinds of ideas we're waiting for now. So this is also something that's happening, that's an affordance in a time of crisis, that you're forced or that you're incentivized, or you're curious about what is possible in a very large counterfactual. It's that kind of thinking that we need to really support and generate in our kids. I mean, and it's time to do that. Everything's lined up. It's so bad we got to do something else, and it's so good we got the machines do most of it for us. So no better time than now.